Goedemorgen iedereen. Op dit webinar speciaal rond de oproep transport in het CEF-programma of Connecting Europe Facility Program. Het is 10 uur, dus wij kunnen van start gaan. En dit webinar is een co-organisatie van VLEVA, het Vlaams-Europees Verbindingsagentschap, en het Departement Mobiliteit en Openbare Werken van de Vlaamse overheid. Ikzelf ben Kaatje Hevaert. Ik ben sinds kort werkzaam bij VLEVA als liaison officer Europese subsidies en financiering. En dit webinar past daar perfect bij en bij het aanbod dat wij aanbieden rond de Europese subsidies. Dat omvat onder meer een up-to-date aanbod van alle Europese calls op onze website, een subsidieloket waar u terecht kan voor uw vragen rond Europese subsidies en het organiseren van events, workshops, conferenties zoals deze. Vooraleer we van start gaan, overloop ik graag met u het programma van vandaag. We hebben 3 sprekers en achtereenvolgens zijn dat Olivier Silla. Hij is werkzaam bij DG Mobiliteit en Transport van de Europese Commissie en hij zal vooral de beleidscontext van het CEF schetsen. Daarna gaan we over tot een iets meer praktische uiteenzetting en die wordt gegeven door Pilar Baravo Conde van CINEA. En CINEA is het Europees uitvoerend agentschap voor klimaat, infrastructuur en milieu. En zij beheren ook het programma CEF Transport. En afsluiten doen we met Pim Bonne van het Departement Mobiliteit en Openbare Werken. En hij zal het voornamelijk hebben over de Vlaamse deadlines, over de Vlaamse afspraken rond deze oproep. Nog een aantal praktische afspraken vooraleer we starten. U staat allemaal op mute en ook uw camera's zijn uitgeschakeld, dus u hoeft daar zelf niks voor te doen. Indien u vragen heeft, kan u die kwijt in de chatbox en we hebben dan ook na de 3 sprekers ruim de tijd om de vragen voor te leggen aan ons panel. Het is ook zo dat de opname van het webinar, de 3 presentaties en een kort verslag nog deze week op de website van VLEVA komen te staan en u wordt daar ook van op de hoogte gebracht via een mail. Dan geef ik nu zeer graag het woord aan Olivier Silla voor de beleidscontext van het CEF Transport programma. So, Mr. Silla, you can start your presentation now.
Good morning. I hope you can see me and hear me well. Can you see the presentation?
Yes, that's no problem, but we see it in small screen, so maybe you have to enlarge it. Yes, that's better. That's perfect.
Excellent. Thank you very much. And thank you for inviting me and my colleague Pilar from CINEA for this information day. We are doing it with great interest, of course, to promote our Connecting Europe facility first call for the new period. Before starting my presentation, I should say that, of course, we are also doing some generic info days. There was one organized in September, which has been recorded, so you can also watch it on the website of CINEA as it covers all the topics. I will not cover all the topics today, and we will do another one that will focus on the alternative fuel infrastructure facility on the 14th, so in 2 days' time. So if you are interested to go a little bit even more in depth as regards the alternative fuel financing, of course, you can follow this generic info day on the website of CINEA, where you will find the link and all the information. So you are, of course, very well aware of the new transport policy orientation of the European Union and of the member states, which is really linked with our climate agenda. We have now a climate law, so a binding objective to reduce our greenhouse gas emissions by 55% by 2030. So this is extremely demanding, especially for the transport sector. And so you will see that all the union programs, and in particular the CEF, have to contribute as much as possible to achieving this objective. The Connecting Europe facility is composed of 3 envelopes, so 25.8 billion in total. What is, of course, relevant here is the general envelope, so accessible to all member states with 11.3 billion, and a smaller envelope concerning military mobility, 1.7, while the rest that you see on the picture, the 12 in blue, are transfer from the cohesion fund, so only available to the cohesion member states. As I was saying, really the Green Deal and the smart mobility strategy is really the red line that we are following, which also means that we have a quite strict climate earmarking of all the expenditures, and the CEF has to reach a minimum of 60% of its financial envelope, but we believe that for CEF Transport it will be much higher, probably at least 70%, as we are traditionally supporting quite a lot of railway and inland waterways, and these, of course, these investments are tracked quite high. Now, the way this Connecting Europe facility, the CEF, is put into operation, it follows certain work programs. So we have adopted a work program 21-23, which sets how the funds will be allocated in these first 3 years. And we have decided to front load 70% of our entire CEF budget in these 3 years. And this will be done through 3 calls for proposals. So the first one has been published in September, and this is the subject of our meeting today. Then there will be the repetition of the same call in 22 and 23. So here really the idea is that applicants will find back the same priorities and the same let's say budget allocation between the priorities every year, so that really we receive applications when they are the most mature and everyone has the same chances. And then the second block you see here is that in addition we have a new instrument, I will mention it in my presentation, which is this alternative fuel infrastructure facility. Here the system is a bit different. It's a rolling call that is now open with a certain number of cut-off dates, and this is really focusing on the infrastructure for recharging and refueling for alternative fuels. And we have, of course, also some technical assistance. When we speak about the main call, so there are some indicative allocations specified in the CEF regulation that have been mirrored in the call text. Notably, there is a split between the completion of the TEN-T network, so the investments in further railway lines, inland waterways, capacities in ports, and this type of investments. So here, this should represent 60% of the overall envelope. And within this 60%, 85% should go to the core network. Of course, this links to our policy priority to complete the core network by 2030. So, of course, hence this higher share for the core network. And we have a second component where basically you will find everything that is smart, digital, safety, resilience, the alternative fuel facility. So basically what we could call the modernization of the existing TEN-T network with a share of 40%. So if you scroll through the call, you will see that each call has an indicative budget. So where does it come from? It comes from this indicative allocation. I was mentioning that every type of activity this time will be climate tracked, so it's nothing to be done for you in the sense that for each call and each topic within a call there is a predefined tracking coefficient. But of course this is quite important for the program, and climate proofing will also be also something that on which we will insist. Again, nothing, let's say, really nothing major for applicants in the sense that for large projects, applicants have to do in any case environmental impact assessment, which already includes the climate aspects. But now, if possible, we recommend the use of the technical guidance on the climate proofing that we have just issued. We understand that if you have already started, of course, all your impact assessments, perhaps you would have difficulties to come back and redo it according to the guidelines. So that's why for this call, it is only recommended. Also, perhaps a novelty, we would very much encourage applicants to look a little bit also into mitigation measures, a bit more than in the past. And of course, all these aspects will also be eligible. So for instance, if within a project there are some reforestation activities or noise protection barriers, so this can be taken on board as an eligible cost. And we would like also to encourage applicants to look at synergetic elements. So within your transport project, if there is possibility, for instance, to have a little bit of renewable electricity generation that serves the purpose of the transport project, it can only improve its socio-economic case, and in that case, then it will be eligible as a cost, and then it will be co-financed in the same manner as the rest of the activity. So let's say I will not go through all the eligible actions today. As I said, it was covered in this more generic info day. I will probably focus, as I was invited to, on the topics that perhaps are of higher interest for you. And I will start with maritime and inland waterways. So there you see that you see in the reference in the title, this green line with these acronyms. It simply means that there are 4 different calls in relation with this. So for you, you need to look, of course, only at the calls that end with a gen, which is general, so not the cohesion calls. And then the difference is simply that you have one call that relates to the core network and one call that relates to the comprehensive network, so depending on the location of the action. So that's how to read these acronyms. But if you go on the website of CEF, where you have the call page, you also have a table with a matrix where you can clearly see per topic and per type of network what is the relevant call for you. So on maritime ports, you will find what we have supported so far, but with a few inflections. So everything that has to do with facilitation of port access, pretty much unchanged. We will continue to support. When it comes to basic port infrastructure, there we will continue to support capacity expansions and basic port infrastructure, but we would like really to give certain priorities. We will certainly look at the global concept in and around the port as regards zero and low multimodal solutions. So for instance, if a capacity expansion of a component comes just in isolation without any explanation on how this extra capacity will be shipped into the hinterland, and if we realize that it will just generate additional road transport, probably the project will not get a very good score. On the contrary, if there is a global concept where it is also explained that this extra capacity will then feed into new rail capacity or inland capacity, or that at least there is a global concept, then of course this is what we are looking at. We will also, and this is a novelty, support development of capacity in ports that are linked to offshore wind farms. We know that many ports are already in this area, and even certain ports are specializing on this. So this is, of course, a very positive synergy with energy sector, and we will support it. And of course, that's not so much relevant for you. We will, of course, look at the specific situation of certain member states in terms of insularity and remoteness. Shore-side electricity supply remains fully in the picture. It is important to underline that it is not treated as alternative fuel, so it is here really in the maritime port priority, simply because it is now kind of basic component of the port infrastructure. So there it is fully eligible. And then the rest is pretty much what we also were supporting before. So the port reception facilities for waste, the activities that are necessary for year-round navigability, and the rail and road connections within ports. Again, as regards the road connections, this has to, of course, fit within the general idea of greening the sector. The co-financing rates, 30% for most of these equipments, and only 50% in specific cases. But I will not enter into the details. This you can see in the call text. On the digitalization aspects, we will of course support the maritime single window environment, both as regards the adaptation of the national single windows to the new requirements, and the interfaces between the national and the European system, and this can be supported at the rate of 50%. We will also, under digitalization, continue to support VTMIS, so the vessel traffic monitoring and information systems, and here again, the rate will be at 50%. It is quite specialized. I would not perhaps go much longer on this. Motorways of the sea, again, will be supported. Here, basically, you can finance what I was describing more or less under the port facility. So in terms of content, it's pretty much the same. The only big difference, of course, is that if you are doing it in the context of motorways of the sea, as there is this cooperation between several member states, this cooperation component, the co-funding rate is 50%, as of course we would like to favor the establishment of new short sea shipping links that are important for decarbonization of the transport system. Now, coming to the inland waterways and inland ports, quite important, and quite, let's say, we try to enlarge as much as possible the possibilities for support there. So, of course, we will continue to support the upgrade or the creation of new waterways. This includes the locks, the bridges, but also automation in the way this infrastructure is operated, the interconnections between the inland waterway and maritime ports or railroad terminals, access of inland ports, and within inland ports, there we can support basic port infrastructure, including shoreside electricity supply, port reception facilities, as it was already the case, year-round navigability, and also the possibility to equip the waterside infrastructure for mooring and waterborne operations along the waterway, so not only in the port. So quite let's say enlarged possibilities compared to what we had, and at a rate of 50%. So it's more than we also used to have for inland waterways. So we, as a complement, of course, concerning the digital part, we will continue to support the deployment of the river information services. Again, this perhaps is not the place to go into all the details of this application, but here the rate will also be 50%. So you can see it more in detail if you are in this specific area. Now, we have a few elements that, let's say, are a bit at the interface between the modes. So one is this notion of multimodal passenger hubs. That is a bit of a novelty. There, the idea is to support mainly studies or small projects because the budget is quite small, but to favor actions that are within a node, allowing a better intermodality for passengers, connections between long distance modes. Of course, it has to be located in an urban node of the core network because, as I said, the budget for this specific priority is very small, so it's quite limited, and there should be a link with the sustainable urban mobility plan or an equivalent plan at regional or national level. Accessibility and cycle infrastructure have to be taken into account. Perhaps also quite important for you on the still on the smart and safe mobility, we would like to continue supporting safe and secure parking infrastructure with even a larger budget, co-financing at 50%. And this can relate both to the development of new safe and secure parking or the upgrade of existing parkings. And then it can also relate to applications that favor, optimize the use of the existing safe and secure parking capacity. The idea is that we target the core network, but we are very well aware that the parking and the space and the lands to develop such type of parkings may not be directly located along the motorway. So there is a bit of a flexibility. It could also be on certain sections of the comprehensive network if these are really feeder sections to the core network. So here there will be a bit of flexibility. Really, the idea is to increase quite considerably the number of parkings and their capacity as it is really a priority. Maximum co-funding rate 50%, as I was indicating. ITS, certainly we will continue to support ITS, so both as regards the deployment of or upgrade of ITS infrastructure and services, deployment of CITS stations will be still supported, and there I will not enter into the details of these specifications, but for those who are following this more specifically, you know that there are some specifications developed by the C-Roads platform, and that all the CITS stations also have to follow a certain number of security aspects and other specifications. But that is detailed further in the code documentation. We will also support the use of the electronic freight transport information system through many technical assistance and preparatory measures by member states. There, the support can include, of course, the mapping of competent authorities and their competencies, also the resources available, the establishment of an implementation plan, and exchanges between member states. So this is something that is more directed to the member states than to the individual companies. It is important to mention that there will be some common specifications coming. So I think for let's say individual investments at company, then you should probably wait for the further call for proposals once there are these common specifications adopted. So I have not gone through all the topics and all that are open. So you can have, of course, you can have a look at all this call text and this matrix that I was mentioning on the website of CNEA. What is important clearly is the deadline for submission, 19th of January, but my colleague Pilar from CNEA will go more into the details of how this application and evaluation works. Now, a few words on the alternative fuel infrastructure facility. So why is it separate from the rest of the call? It's mainly because of two things. The first is that it's not a simple call where you will open it and you close it and it's over. No, it's open for 3 years with 5 cutoff dates. So it means that you can basically apply when you want, and your application will be looked at the next cutoff date. So it's a rolling system. That's the first reason. And the second reason is that it's still a blending approach, in the sense that we require the applicants to come together with a bank or a financial institution. Why? Because as we are in a logic of fast deployment of this type of infrastructure, we would like to only receive applications that are mature from a technical and financial point of view. And so if a bank or a financial institution has looked at it and has taken the commitment to provide some financing, of course, it means that the concept, the file is more mature, and that we are really in a fast deployment mode. So these are the two specificities why AFIF is treated separately. And we have also focused a bit the type of support, 3 blocks. So the first block on the left, which is called unit costs, basically relates to road infrastructure, so the electricity charging points along the road infrastructure, both for light-duty vehicles and heavy-duty vehicle, and also the grid connection that goes with them. Unit costs, because we will exclusively support this type of investments with predefined unit costs. So there is a tariff per charging station that you are entitled to, and basically we will not request any costs, any bills, any documentation from the applicants in the grant agreement, but just the number of stations, their locations, and the fact that they have been built, and then we multiply by the unit costs, and you get your grant amount. So very much simplified approach. And I will go more into details on this. Then we have the second block, which basically relates to still electricity, but where this unit contribution approach is not feasible because the basket of cost is still too heterogeneous. So this relates to public transport, for instance, the charging stations into bus depot, the inland waterway and maritime sector, and including part of the vessels, the port equipment and airport ground operations. So all these small vehicles going around and pulling planes in airports are being electrified progressively. So if this requires to install infrastructure for charging, this can also be done. Hydrogen is, of course, here we would support the refueling stations, and this is both along the roads, but also in maritime and inland waterways, ports, and also the railways in a certain extent. I will be more specific, but here we would reimburse based on fixed rates, based on the incurred costs. And last, we still have some possibility to support LNG infrastructure in maritime and inland waterway ports, but as it is considered a transitional fuel, we are doing it with a quite reduced rate of 10%. So the AFIF budget is looking only at the general envelope, 1.2 billion, and there is no pre-allocation per cutoff date, so we'll see what comes and how we allocate this. And the 2/3 of this budget is reserved for operations with so-called implementing partners. So implementing partners are public financial institutions, national promotional banks, including, for instance, the EIB, but also we can have others. While 1/3 is can be used with simply commercial banks, so a very normal financial partner, a commercial bank. So very quickly to illustrate a bit, so on the top of the slide, you see the unit contributions for the electric charging points. So you see that, for instance, so the minimum is 150 kilowatts there. For each charging point, you would get under the general envelope 20,000 euro. And if you have, each time you have 4 charging points in a station, you are also entitled to get the a unit contribution for the grid connection. While for all the rest, we will support through fixed co-financing rate. So the electricity charging points, for instance, for public transport, what I was mentioning for bus depot, for instance, they're 30%. Or if you build the charging points in an airport for the ground operations, then it's also 30%. while for and the same is also for hydrogen investments. So under the general envelope, 30%, and I was mentioning for LNG only 10%. So I think that's further elaboration on the unit contributions. I will perhaps not go into further details. So how does it work? Simply, the only change compared to a normal application is that you first need to speak with the bank. So either you speak with DIB or a national promotional bank or your commercial bank, and at the moment you apply, you need to demonstrate that the bank, the financial institution has agreed, has approved a loan in relation with your project, and the bank will have to give you a form that you can download on the call page. It's a letter with an annex, not too long, not too complicated to fill in, but which clearly identifies the project and identifies the fact that this financial institution has looked at it and that their board, depending on their organization, but usually the board has approved in principle that you will get a loan from them. It's not the financing agreement, it's not the final signature, it's just the principal agreement that the project has been looked at, and that there is a principal agreement to get that you can get a loan. Of course, if you can also, if you have the loan agreement signed, that's fine as well, but we are not requesting that at this stage. And then, and this is an eligibility condition. So if you come without that, you will not, your application will not be looked at. So then we have a very normal evaluation procedure that my colleague will describe, as for the other type of projects. And then we have the agreement that once we award the grant, we of course we inform the financial institution, and then the financial institution sign the financing agreement, so the final signature with the EIB or the bank and so on, and then only then we sign the grant agreement. So that's quite key for us. That of course, if you do not get the grant, it's the financial institution can still sign with you. That's their decision, no problem. But if you do not get the financing agreement from the bank, then you will not get the grant either. So as I was mentioning, there will be 5 cutoff dates. The first one is aligned with the cutoff date of the main call on the 19th of January. But of course, if you miss that one, no worries, you can come on the 7th of June 2022. And by the way, you can also have projects. For instance, if you have a very large deployment project for electricity charging points, you can have a first batch that is coming in January, and then a second batch that is coming to a second cutoff date, and that's absolutely all right. So that's in a nutshell a bit this call, the first call 21 and the AFIF. We have, of course, you can have, of course, access to all the call documentation on the CEF website. I'm sure my colleague will elaborate on that. There is also a system of frequently asked questions that you can see directly where the call is located, but you can also send questions. And I can only also invite you, for those who are interested, to attend the more specific info day that we are organizing on the alternative fuel infrastructure facility on the 14th of October. So thank you very much, and of course I'm available for questions. Thank you.
Thank you very much for your time and availability. I see a lot of questions are coming in the question box, so that's a good sign. Maybe time for 2 questions, and then afterwards we can handle the other ones. One question is, where exactly can we find the information on the core and the comprehensive networks? Can you answer this one, please?
Yes, certainly. So you can go to 10Tech. So there is a website called 10Tech where you have interactive maps and you can choose the layers. And yeah, you will see exactly, you can zoom in and you can see for each section of the network whether it belongs to the core or the comprehensive network.
Okay, thank you. And another question is, what's the difference between the general envelope and the cohesion envelope with regard to the maximum co-funding rate? Maybe you answered this question in your last slides.
Yes, so the cohesion envelope is only is funded from a transfer from the cohesion fund, so it's only eligible for the member states, for the 15 member states who are eligible to the cohesion fund, so not Belgium. And there we have aligned the support rate with the rate that is in the cohesion fund, which is 85%. So there is a higher rate under this cohesion envelope than under the general envelope.
Okay, thank you. The other questions, we will come back on them after all presentations. Ik geef dan nu zeer graag het woord aan mevrouw Pilar Bravo-Con van CINEA en zij zal het vooral hebben over de indieningsprocedure en de aandachtspunten voor de eerste projectoproepen. So you can start your presentation right now.
Hello everyone. Can you see the presentation?
We can see and we can hear you. It's perfect.
Okay, without the footnotes, right?
Without the footnotes, yes.
Thank you. I would like to start by thanking the organizers of this Info Day, but also Olivier for his very nice presentation on the specific priorities and the more technical aspects on the CEF Transport call, and of course also the attendants for taking the time to join this session. My name is Pilar Bravo-Conde. I'm project officer at CINEA, and today I will be presenting on the most important aspects of the evaluation and our process internally carried out at CINEA. And we'll also provide some information related to the cost-benefit analysis and the budget requirements for the recently launched CEF Transport call. As Olivier also mentioned, for more details, I would highly recommend that you visit CINEA's homepage and as well as the funding and tender portal, and the presentations made by the MOW and CINEA in the Info Day on the 27th of September that were recorded, and then they can be checked because they are available at any time. As you may know, CINEA was recently established on 1st of April, and it is the executive agency that builds on the programs managed by the former INEA and EASME agencies. CINEA is responsible for implementing all the programs that you see in this slide, which will raise a total budget up to 55 billion to be managed. Out of this amount, 31.25 billion are assigned to the management of the CEF program for transport and energy by CINEA. Olivier also showed this tentative timeline. As you know, on the 16th of September, CINEA launched a call for proposals under the Connecting Europe Facility for Transport funding instruments, which will be supporting actions under the general, the cohesion, and the military mobility envelopes. As it can be seen in this slide, the deadline is established on the 19th of January at 5 o'clock Brussels time, and it will be sharp. It would be highly recommendable that those interested on applying for this call aim at doing it, at least leaving a couple of days buffer in order to avoid any sort of technical problem. The deadline will not be extended. Once the proposals are submitted, it starts the evaluation process, which will tentatively take place in the months between February and May, and that would lead to the consultation of the CEF Coordination Committee in June and the launch of the grant agreement preparation right after. The time to grant, meaning the time for the grant agreements to be signed by both parties, is scheduled to take place in October. This slide gives an overview of the evaluation and selection processes. First, there will be an admissibility and eligibility check of the proposals. And if the application passes those checks, it will move into the external evaluation. This is a technical evaluation which will be carried out by 3 external experts in the fields. And whereas the CBA is required, then there will also be a CBA expert that will analyze the proposals and will provide her or his assessment to the other technical experts. After this, the proposal may jump into the internal evaluation and the financial selection, which will be led by DG MOW, with involvement and the support of some other Commission services. And on this basis, there will be a decision made on which proposals to recommend for funding. For a proposal to be admissible, it must be submitted before the deadline via the Funding and Tenders portal. It cannot be done in any other way, and paper submissions are not possible any longer. It must also be readable, accessible, and printable for obvious reasons. At the same time, the application must be complete. It is specified in the call for proposals what it is required in terms of requested information and supporting documents. And of course, all these elements need to be included. If something is missing, the application will not be admissible, unfortunately, and follow-ups will not take place. In order for a proposal to be eligible, the participants must be legal entities established in one of the eligible countries. And furthermore, the proposed project must, of course, be located on the respective TEN-T network and obviously respond to the priorities and topics of the call. Further in this process, for those proposals which are found admissible and eligible, CINEA will be assessing the operational and financial capacity. The operational capacity implies that the applicants must be able, of course, to demonstrate their capacity to implement the project or a project of the same type, have the experience, the qualifications, and the resources from an operational and also technical point of view. Public bodies, member states organizations, and international organizations will not be checked for the operational capacity. In the same way, applicants must have the financial capacity to implement the proposed project. And therefore, we need to assess whether the applicants have enough resources. In the event one applicant submits several proposals, the applicant will need to prove that they can and they have sufficient financial capacity for implementing all those projects in parallel at the same time. Again, we will not be assessing the financial capacity of public bodies, international organizations, or if the requested grant amount is 60,000 euros or lower. Having passed these criteria, then the three external experts will assess the proposals based on 5 award criteria. Through a consensus meeting, they will weight the different criteria with a score and will conclude with a mark between 1 and 5 points. There is a minimum pass score per award criteria of 3 points. This means that only the proposals that will be receiving at least 15 points and on the basis of having achieved at least 3 points on all the award criteria will be considered for financing. Looking at the award criteria, I would like to highlight a couple of points without going too much into details for all of them. For the priority and urgency, what we will be evaluating is basically the correspondence of the proposals with the priorities as specified in the work program and in the call text. And in particular, there will be focus on the EU added value. With regards to the maturity of the proposals, what the experts will be looking into is, on the one hand, the readiness and the ability to start and complete the action by the proposed start and by the proposed end dates. And this is very important, especially because in CEF1, we have seen that many of the ongoing projects were experiencing implementation delays. Therefore, it is necessary that the proposals will be realistic with regards to the start and end dates. In connection with this point, I would also like to highlight, as already also mentioned by Olivier, the fact that the work program is valid for 3 years. Therefore, there will be new calls with the same associated funding budget in 2022 and 2023. Therefore, we would like to advise applicants to apply to the period that fits best with the implementation of the proposed dates. Concerning the maturity award, we will also look into the status of the permits and of the financial availability. With regards to the quality of the application, we will be looking into the soundness of the implementation plan, both financially and technically, but also the structures that have been put in place in order to manage an optimal implementation of the action. So there is a sound project management, risk management, and quality management procedures in place. Communication is also a relevant element, and the communication strategy also needs to be demonstrated in the application. With regards to impact, here we will be looking into the social and environmental impact, including the climate impact and some other externalities. Under these criteria, the CBA comes into play, if applicable. What's also important is to look into projects that have a cross-border dimension and how they are contributing to this, and also to the effect into the network as such. With regards to the catalytic effect, what's important here is that the financial support from the Connecting Europe facility should help the projects to move into the next steps of the implementation with the last needed push. And so we are therefore very interested in seeing what is the effect that the EU financing is having and how can it give the projects that necessary final push to actually happen. To conclude with the evaluation and award part, I would like to give a few reminders about what needs to be bear in mind in the process of preparing an application. Please read carefully the work program, the call text, and other relevant documents that have already been published all together in the call. First of all, you need to make sure that the subject of your proposal falls within the scope of the work program, but also that fulfills the requirements. Under the Connecting Europe facility, applications need the support or the agreement of the concerned member states. And therefore, we would highly recommend that you make contact with the representatives from the member states as soon as possible in the process. And so they know that you are planning on submitting an application. Additionally, they also have much experience working with CEF in the past period, and therefore they can also provide valuable guidance and support. Also note that the application form consists of Part A, which contains mostly administrative information and data, and then the more technical Part B, which has a restriction of maximum 120 pages. If an application exceeded 120 pages, those extra pages would be cut off, which would naturally have a detrimental effect in the quality of the proposal. Applicants are of course not expected to submit 120 pages. There will be naturally a big variety of proposals. There can be some small projects as well as there can be large infrastructure developments. So the amount of information should match the size and the complexity of the projects. As you may know, we have changed into a new financing period. And we have also changed some terms or like some of the terminology. For instance, what we used to call action in CEF1 now would be referred as project. Kindly be aware that the term of project should not be confused with the term of global project. To facilitate the evaluation of the proposal, it's very important that you facilitate the requested information in the most clear, factual, and concise manner. In line with this, we would recommend that prior to the submission, the application is read by someone who does not have the same insight of the project details as those working in the preparation of the proposal. The applications should be able to be understood by anyone. With regards to deliverables and milestones, in the future, we will be putting a lot of emphasis on them. And therefore, we would also encourage you to put extra attention on defining the deliverables and milestones in your proposal. On a regular basis, we will be following and monitoring the implementation of the projects using these milestones and deliverables as a basis. With regards to the timing, costs under the calls of 2021 can be eligible as from the 1st of January 2021, which is a change from the previous step 1, and it will also be a difference with regards to the upcoming 2022 and 2023. The duration of the actions shall be 2 to 3 years for the studies and 4 to 5 years for works or mixed projects, maximum going until the 31st of December 2026. For the applications for works and for which the environmental impact assessment is mandatory, by the date of the application, the key steps of the environmental impact assessment should have been completed. Changing topic and jumping into the Cba requirements. The general rule here is that proposals with work components have to submit a Cba. The requirement for Cba is different from the last programming period, and the changes come from the desire to actually increase the proportionality in comparison to the size of the project, but also to the added value of the tool in comparison to different types of projects. In a number of cases, it will be possible to submit simplified Cba, while for some other categories, the Cba requirements will be completely cropped. What in the past was called cost effectiveness analysis is no longer required. For those projects which will not fall in those two categories exceptions, they will need to submit what we call a full cost benefit analysis. This is the same requirement as we had in the past, meaning a standalone text document of at least 20 pages. This text shall explain all the assumptions and describe the findings of the Cba, and in addition, there is the Cba cash flow template to be filled in to present the results of the Cba in a common and simplified format. This is merely a presentational tool, and we will use it to harmonize the calculations from the applicants, but also to ease the evaluation from the external Cba expert. This template is essentially like the one last year, and there have been very few changes. However, what is new is the so-called simplified cost-benefit analysis. In comparison to a full Cba, the main difference is that there is no need to submit a standalone report explaining the assumptions and presenting the results. For this project, we will consider the information on the socioeconomic impact, which is provided in the application form party, as sufficient. In addition, instead of the Cba cash flow template, applicants should replace it with the simplified Cba calculator. Comparing this tool with the Cba cash flow template, the simplified Cba calculator requires less input from the applicant side, and therefore it's also simpler to calculate the performance indicators. The tool has been designed to meet all of the CEF Transport requirements, so the advantage of the simplified Cba calculator is that it requires just fewer inputs to produce the output indicators by automating the calculation of the externalities and the monetization of the time savings. For the projects when a simplified Cba is required, still applicants may submit a full Cba instead of a simplified Cba. If, for instance, by doing so, they believe that then they would reinforce their application, or maybe if they already have the Cba ready. With regards to the Cba information, there is much more related information in a dedicated document called Guidance on Economic Appraisal for CEF Transport Projects, and the link can be found in the application form template. After seeing the different types of CBA requirements, in this table, you can see to which priority they do apply. So for all projects relating to smart and interoperable mobility, as well as the reduction of rail freight noise, neither the CEA or the CBA are required. No CBA is either required for military mobility. With respect to alternative fuels infrastructure, we don't require the CBA from the implementing partner. For the other types of project, a simplified CBA will be sufficient as a general rule for projects of less than 10 million euros of eligible costs. For all of the other projects, a full CBA is required. Applications relating to a new phase of a project, which is already under construction and for which other construction phases were or are supported by the program or by the previous program, those may resubmit the CBA originally submitted, given that they comply with some requirements. First, the project for which the funding is requested was already included in the scope of the original CBA. And secondly, that no significant changes have occurred that may impair the value of the original CBA. If applicants decide to resubmit the original CBA, they must confirm that these two conditions are met. Changing now into the budget, we shift from CEF1 into CEF2, and alongside, we also change the submission model of TENTEC for the e-grant system instead, the CEP. Now, all the transactions needed throughout the project cycle will be operating fully electronically. This is a corporate system under the initiative of the European Commission in order to make efficient transactions at the level of all of the Commission's funded programs. As already mentioned before, proposals are required to be submitted via the Funding and Tenders portal. This is CEP, that stands for the Submission and Evaluation of Proposals. In order to make it easier with regards to the data input into the system, into the e-grants, some financial tables, Excel files, have been elaborated. These different budget breakdowns is what you find in this slide. First, the budget breakdown that you will find in the tool, in the e-grants, and then the other two are the Excel files that CINEA has developed. For the budget breakdown using CEP, in the budget-related section, you will discover that there is a new approach to the budget structuring compared to how it was before. It is based on new cost categories. As you can see, there are 5 categories. One is personnel costs. Those are like in CEF1 corresponding to employees' costs, natural seconded persons, under the contracts, etc. With regards to this, there are 2 reference documents related to the personnel costs which are included in the call. Secondly, there are also subcontracting costs, which involve contracts for goods, works, or services that are part of the tasks of the action itself. And then purchase costs, which entails contracts for goods, works, or services which are needed to carry out the action, but which are not part of the action tasks themselves. So for instance, equipment, consumables, and supplies. There are also other categories and indirect costs. Please be aware that indirect costs remain ineligible under CEF2, as it was before. Unfortunately, it could not be removed from the list due to some IT constraints. But even though you see it there, kindly do not add any cost under the indirect cost because they will not be taken. In principle, one co-financing rate will be applied per proposal. However, there is the possibility of having that funding rate increase given that certain conditions are fulfilled and that it is well explained in the application. The standard funding rate under the general envelope is 30% for works and 50% for studies. And then under the cohesion envelope goes up to 85. However, under works there will be what is called topax, which is sort of a bonus. So for example, if a proposal properly justifies that the project deals with a cross-border link, the funding rate can go up from the 30 standard funding rate to 50%. And if additionally it is justified that, for example, it has an integrated management structure, it could go up to 55%. As previously mentioned, there is also new terminology in CEF2. For instance, work package is what in CEF1 used to be called activities. So this budget encoded in an Excel file is configured based in activities, even though here it's called work package. There is no distinction by cost category, and it allows to encode different funding grades per work package. It is to be encoded as totals per work package and per applicant. Several applicants per work package are possible, but also per reporting period, just like in CEF1. And to complete this part related to the budget, we have for the other types of costs a last detailed budget table and calculator, in this case for the unit contributions. There is a specific model grant agreement for that. An Excel template has been elaborated to encode each of the unit cost types. So for rail freight nodes, ERTMS, and the alternative fuels infrastructure facility. There is also an Excel file that allows encoding the unit numbers per category of unit costs and calculates the total funding. As Olivier also mentioned, there is a dedicated FAQ under the funding and tender portal per calls, and then any questions are very welcome in the CEF functional mailbox that you can see here, the CEF Transport calls at eceuropa.eu, and they will be responding as soon as possible. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much also for your presentation and availability. Gezien de tijd stel ik voor dat we onmiddellijk doorgaan naar de bijdrage van Departement Mobiliteit en Openbare Werken. Dus Pim Bonne die zal het meer bepaald hebben over de specifieke regels en interne deadlines voor Vlaamse projectindieners. Dus het woord is aan jou, Pim.
Ja, goedemiddag. Zien jullie het scherm?
Ik zie je presentatie, maar je mag ze nog groter zetten. En ik hoor jou perfect, dus dat is goed.
Oké. Ja. Oké. Ja, goedemiddag iedereen. Ik ga nog een woordje uitleg geven bij de procedures in Vlaanderen om een project in te dienen. En zoals jullie begrepen hebben, is er toch redelijk wat veranderd deze programmaperiode. Er is een heel nieuw systeem om de dossiers in te dienen via de Funding and Tenders portal, waar sommigen misschien al ervaring mee hebben van de onderzoeksprojecten. Horizon 2020 maakte daar al gebruik van. Dus een paar zaken nog op een rijtje. Het is al een paar keer gezegd vanmiddag. Lees het werkprogramma en de oproepen zeer goed na. U hebt gezien dat er in totaal 77 mogelijke subprioriteiten opengesteld zijn. Dus het is heel belangrijk om duidelijk te identificeren onder welke prioriteiten u een dossier wil indienen. Aangezien het een nieuw systeem is, start je ook best zo snel mogelijk om een dossier aan te maken in de Funding and Tenders portal. Het is ook voor ons als lidstaten een nieuw systeem. Dus het is een beetje zoeken. Het zal met trial and error zijn. De informatie is grotendeels dezelfde als onder CEF1, maar ze staat op een andere plaats en er moeten ook andere bijlagen opgeladen worden. Neem ook op tijd contact op met de nationale contactpunten in verband met de nationale procedures en deadlines. Dus vandaag gaan wij even toelichten hoe het in Vlaanderen werkt, maar de deadlines in de buurlanden of in andere landen van de Unie zijn niet dezelfde. Dus het is ook belangrijk om u daarover tijdig te informeren. Projecten die fysieke ingrepen hebben, dus werken uitvoeren, hebben ook een aantal milieuverklaringen nodig van de bevoegde autoriteiten. Die moeten ook tijdig aangevraagd worden om bij het dossier meegestuurd te worden. En dus ja, dien het voorstel tijdig in voor de nationale validatie, dus voor het Member State Agreement waarvan sprake. En de deadline van CINEA is een harde deadline op 19 januari om 5 uur. Brusselse tijd. Binnen België hebben wij een vrij afgeleide taakverdeling tussen de federale overheid en de gewesten omtrent deze TEN-T-dossiers of CEF-dossiers. En overeenkomstig de gewestelijke bevoegdheden zal Vlaanderen dus valideren voor projecten uitgevoerd op Vlaams grondgebied met betrekking tot havens, maritiem transport, waterwegen, wegen, beveiligde parkings, innovatie, infrastructuur voor alternatieve brandstoffen, multimodale passagiershubs, transport infrastructure resilience, wat een nieuwe prioriteit is, militaire mobiliteit en dan de diverse telematica-toepassingen. De federale overheid die blijft bevoegd voor het aftekenen van CEF-dossiers rond spoor, inclusief ook ERTMS en rail freight noise, en ook voor luchtvaart, inclusief CESAR. Nu kan de collega's van de federale overheid via het adres daar contacteren. Intern Belgisch hebben we ook de afspraak gemaakt als er gewestoverschrijdende dossiers zijn, en dat gaat dan veelal dossiers rond innovatie of vergroening, de uitrol van alternatieve brandstofinfrastructuur, waar dat in meerdere gewesten uitrol is, zal ook de federale overheid zorgen voor de validatie na afstemming met ons. Internationale organisaties die in Brussel gevestigd zijn, die dienen ook via de federale overheid een Member State Agreement te bekomen. En eigenlijk hetzelfde ook voor de collega's van Wallonië, die hebben dezelfde bevoegdheden als in Vlaanderen. Dus ook voor dossiers in Wallonië, enkel Wallonië dan, rond havens, waterwegen enzovoort, kunnen de collega's van de Service Public de Wallonie gecontacteerd worden. Dus zoals gezegd, alle CEF-projecten die uitgevoerd worden op Vlaams grondgebied dienen door ons gevalideerd te worden. Die validatie is eigenlijk te beschouwen als een aftekening ter kennisname en ook een bevestiging dat het project past binnen de beleidsvisie van onze minister. Die validatie houdt geen enkel financieel engagement in van de Vlaamse overheid. Dus eigenlijk willen wij gewoon weten wat er gebeurt op vlak van CEF-projecten in Vlaanderen en wensen wij dat dan ook in te kunnen passen in het beleid hier. De validatie gebeurt door de secretaris-generaal van het Departement MOW. Wij vragen ook in Vlaanderen dat u tegen eind november, tegen 29 november, al een eerste projectconcept aan ons bezorgt. Dat is vrij kort, dat zijn 2 A4'tjes waar u beschrijft wat wil u doen, hoeveel gaat het kosten, met wie wenst u het te doen, onder welke prioriteiten wilt u het indienen. En het schabloon daarvoor kan u op onze website downloaden en vragen wij om te bezorgen via onze functionele mailbox cef@mow.vlaanderen.be. Begin december zullen wij dan alle ontvangen concepten ook voorleggen aan het kabinet van de minister, maar zonder tegenbericht kan u de projectaanvraag gewoon verder uitwerken. Dus het is in het verleden bijna nooit gebeurd dat het kabinet echt zware bedenkingen had bij een concept dat in uitwerking was. Wat betreft het volledige dossier zouden wij graag kort na het kerstreces tegen 5 januari volgend jaar het volledige dossier van jullie ontvangen, zodat wij dan nog eens kunnen screenen, nakijken en dan door onze secretaris-generaal laten valideren. Dus dan hebben we eigenlijk nog 2 weken voor een laatste nazicht en het aanleveren van die handtekening. Dat validatieformulier dient dan ook opgeladen te worden in de Funding and Tenders portal. En via de link in de presentatie die u achteraf zal krijgen, kan u meteen al doorklikken naar onze website waar al een vooraf ingevuld validatieformulier kan gedownload worden. Let ook op, de deadlines zijn niet in alle landen dezelfde. Dus in België, dit is afgestemd ook met het Waals gewest en de federale overheid, vraagt iedereen om tegen 5 januari de final draft van uw dossier te bekomen. In andere landen is dat misschien nog net voor het kerstreces of misschien nog een paar dagen later dan bij ons. Is ook al aan bod gekomen in de voorgaande presentaties. Er zijn ook een aantal documenten die in bijlagen moeten meegestuurd worden. Enerzijds is dat de MKBA, waar Pilar al uitvoerig over informatie heeft gegeven. Dan moet er ook informatie omtrent de MER, het milieueffectenrapport, meegestuurd worden. En tot slot moeten ook een aantal milieuverklaringen aangeleverd worden omtrent de impact van het project op Natura 2000 sites en op de impact op waterkwaliteit. Dus wat betreft de MKBA moeten projecten die werken omvatten een bij voorkeur Engelstalige maatschappelijke kosten-batenanalyse aanleveren. Zoals u daarnet ook begrepen hebt, projecten van minder dan 10 miljoen euro investeringskost mogen een vereenvoudigde MKBA aanleveren. En in de richtlijnen van CINEA, uit die richtlijnen blijkt dus dat de guidance van DG Regio nog steeds richtinggevend is om die MKBA op te maken. In Vlaanderen werken wij bij voorkeur met de standaardmethodiek voor MKBA's van transportinfrastructuurprojecten en die is gealigneerd voor wat betreft de economische analyse met die DG Regio guidance. Wat betreft milieuverklaringen is er een nieuw formulier dat opgeladen dient te worden, dat eigenlijk vrij gelijkaardig is als het vroegere formulier C. En dat heet nu de Environmental Compliance File, waarin aangetoond moet worden dat de Europese milieuwetgeving nageleefd wordt. En daar zijn dus 3 onderdeeltjes: informatie over de MER, informatie over Natura 2000 en informatie over de waterkwaliteit. Wat betreft MER moet eigenlijk aangegeven worden of het project al dan niet onder de bijlage 1 of 2 van de MER-richtlijn valt. En dat zijn veelal grotere infrastructuurprojecten met een grote milieu-impact. In elk geval, dus of dat uw project onder die bijlage valt of niet, dienen diverse documenten aangeleverd te worden ter onderbouwing en staving van de MER-status van uw project. In tegenstelling tot de eerste CEF-periode is het niet meer nodig dat ook de dienst MER van het departement Omgeving dat nog eens bevestigt, die MER-status. Dus u dient gewoon documenten op te laden in de portal. Wat betreft de impact op Natura 2000 sites is er eigenlijk weinig veranderd. Daar hebt u een verklaring van de bevoegde autoriteit nodig als uw project geen impact heeft op Natura 2000 sites. Dus eigenlijk vraagt men dan een bevestiging van de bevoegde autoriteit dat dat zo is. Als er wel impact is, dan hebt u daar een beoordeling moeten uitvoeren, compensatiemaatregelen moeten plannen. Dus als er wel impact is, moet u gewoon een aantal documenten mee opladen met de aanvraag. Als u contact opneemt met het agentschap Natuur en Bos, dat verantwoordelijk is voor Natura 2000, kan u best een kleine samenvattende nota over uw project meesturen en ook al kaderen waar uw project ligt ten opzichte van de Vlaamse Natura 2000 gebieden. En die kan u op een kaart terugvinden via de link in de presentatie. U mag ook al een eigen afweging van de mogelijke effecten van uw project op Natura 2000 meesturen. En de collega's van het agentschap Natuur en Bos kunnen dan met u contact opnemen als zij nog vragen hebben of als zij bijkomende documenten van het dossier willen opvragen. Dus zoals gezegd, het agentschap Natuur en Bos kan hiervoor gecontacteerd worden. Zij kunnen via die functionele mailbox aangeschreven worden met collega's Leni Demarest en Barbara Geschier in CC graag. Wat betreft de impact op waterkwaliteit dient die in elk geval onderbouwd te worden met een verklaring van de bevoegde autoriteiten. Dus of uw project nu wel impact heeft op de waterkwaliteit of geen impact heeft, er is een verklaring vereist van de Vlaamse Milieumaatschappij, die eigenlijk die verklaring aflevert namens de Coördinatiecommissie Integraal Waterbeleid in Vlaanderen. U kan de commissie Integraal Waterbeleid bij de VMM ook via een functionele mailbox contacteren met collega Lien Eierman in kopie. Wat betreft de timing, heel belangrijk. De beide betrokken agentschappen, Agentschap Natuur en Bos en de Vlaamse Milieumaatschappij, hebben gevraagd om als u een milieuverklaring nodig hebt, om die uiterlijk 29 november aan te vragen bij de bevoegde diensten. Dus zoals gezegd, stuurt u best een samenvattende nota mee. U kan onze functionele mailbox ook in CC zetten. Zo kunnen wij uw aanvraag mee opvolgen en moesten er problemen zijn, meehelpen een oplossing zoeken. En u moet toch rekening houden met een doorlooptijd van ongeveer 3 weken voor de aflevering van die verklaringen. Dus als alles vlot gaat, zou je die nog net voor het kerstreces moeten kunnen ontvangen. Het is een vrij harde deadline. De collega's van de 2 agentschappen hebben ook benadrukt dat ze het in december ongelooflijk druk hebben de laatste weken. Dus laattijdige aanvragen kunnen we geen garantie geven dat die milieuverklaringen nog tijdig afgehandeld kunnen worden. Hierbij nog even de belangrijkste deadlines op een rijtje. Dus wij ontvangen graag van u een projectconcept tegen 29 november. Ook de aanvragen voor milieuverklaringen is de deadline 29 november. We ontvangen dan graag de final draft van uw volledig dossier tegen 5 januari voor een laatste screening en dan voor het aanleveren van de lidstaatvalidatie. En de deadline bij CINEA is dan op 19 januari om 5 uur Brusselse tijd. Tot slot, het CEF-team binnen het departement is steeds beschikbaar voor advies. En wij zijn steeds bereid om uw concept of wat u al hebt, uw ontwerpaanvraag, even te screenen of samen te overlopen om nog een aantal tips te geven. Dus u kan ons daar zeker voor contacteren. Ook nog eens herhalen, dus ja, bij aanvraag of aanlevering na de bovenvermelde deadlines kunnen wij niet meer garanderen dat u alle nodige documenten in handen zal hebben voor de deadline van 19 januari 2022. U kan het CEF-team contacteren via onze functionele mailbox en sinds deze week hebben wij ook een compleet vernieuwde website onder vlaanderen.be omtrent de Connecting Europe Facility en daar vindt u ook meer informatie nog eens over de indieningsprocedure. Voilà, dat was het van mijn kant. Ik wens jullie allemaal veel succes met de opmaak van jullie dossiers en wij gaan ongetwijfeld nog van jullie horen in het verdere traject.
Dankjewel voor je bijdrage ook. Ik stel voor dat we nu nog een paar vragen beantwoorden. Helaas heeft meneer Sila ons al moeten verlaten. Dus die vragen laten we hem zeker beantwoorden, schriftelijk dan, en nemen we mee op in het verslag. Dat waren vooral vragen rond eligibele kosten, dus we komen daar zeker op terug. Maar ik heb direct al 2 vragen voor jou, Pim. Dus de eerste vraag is of spoorterminalprojecten onder de bevoegdheid van de federale overheid vallen of onder een andere bevoegdheid.
Als het gaat over intermodale terminals, ook bijvoorbeeld in de havens, dan zal Vlaanderen daarvoor aftekenen.
Oké, dank je. En ook nog een vraag rond de milieueffectenrapportage. Moet deze bij indiening van het project al afgesloten zijn of mag ze nog lopende zijn?
Die moet grotendeels... de procedure moet al grotendeels doorlopen zijn. Daar staat ook een specificatie, denk ik, in de oproepteksten. Dus er moeten... al een publieke consultatie van stakeholders moet al gebeurd zijn. En er moet dus ook al een aanvraag ingediend zijn bij de MER-autoriteiten. Dus eigenlijk kan de beslissing van de MER-autoriteit nog hangende zijn, maar de voorgaande stappen moeten wel al doorlopen zijn.
Oké, dankjewel. Ik kijk nog even naar de vragen. Misschien dat jij daar ook een antwoord op kan geven. Zijn er nog subsidies vanuit CEF beschikbaar voor digitalisatieprojecten?
Ja, ik denk uit de presentaties van Olivier Sila bleek dat er toch heel wat mogelijkheden zijn voor digitalisering of voor elektronische systemen. Dus er is een prioriteit rond EFT, Electronic Freight Transport Information, die inzet op het digitaliseren van processen in transport om papieren dossierstromen of documentstromen in de transportsector te digitaliseren. Er zijn ook mogelijkheden rond digitalisering onder River Information Services of zovoort. Dus zeker. Er is ook parallel aan CEF Transport ook een CEF digitaal programma. Dat wordt in België door de FOD Economie getrokken. En dat zet voornamelijk in op 5G-corridors, waaronder ook 5G-corridors voor transport. Maar ik vermoed dat dat het onderwerp voor een andere infodag zal worden. Maar zeker, digitalisering kan zeker aan bod komen.
Ja, dankjewel. En worden er nog TEN-T-days gepland op korte of middellange termijn? Dat was ook een vraag die we binnenkregen.
Ja. Dat is een vraag voor meneer Silla. Voorlopig hebben wij vanuit de lidstaten geen informatie dat er grootse evenementen door de commissie georganiseerd worden op korte termijn.
Maybe this is something that Mrs. Pilar can answer. Are there any TEN-T days planned that you know on the short or middle long?
Not that I'm aware of.
Okay, then we will ask this question to Mrs. Silla and we will take it in our report. And maybe then a last question, I think it's for you or for Mr. Bonne. Is there a possibility of combining the CEF calls? For example, we are a 5G infrastructure company and we would bundle forces and work together with either railways or waterways companies to improve connectivity. So is it possible to combine the calls?
Oh, I don't know if I'm getting it right, but there will be 13 calls, and within each there are a number of topics. So in total there will be about 77 topics. An application can only address one topic. So they have to be specifically related to the topic and to the call that they will be applying for.
Mm-hmm. But they can apply in different calls, I suppose.
Exactly, but it has to be topic specific.
Okay, thank you. So then I think we can finish this webinar. I will thank you all for your presentations, de aanwezigen voor hun aandacht en ik wens jullie allemaal smakelijk eten voor straks. Nog een fijne werkdag en hopelijk tot een volgende VLEVA-activiteit. Tot ziens.
Bedankt, tot ziens.
Thank you very much.